Mike, I don't know if you saw, but before we kind of get into some of this stuff, some great news. So, Pure, which is one of our carriers, is actually coming back to California. They're going to start opening up business again, which is really cool. I think that means that California is softening on the home market, which is really cool. And he's got that news last week, which is awesome. And then yesterday, scrolling Instagram, so electric bikes in my town, but Carlsbad actually. So the city that's closer to the ocean than me, they just started enforcing e-bikes. So if you're under the age of 12, you can't ride an e-bike, and a lot of regulation coming down on that side. But anyways, I just thought I'd share that with you before we got into some details here.
Yeah, I mean, e-bikes are another kind of classic example of something getting ahead of regulation. And people normally, if you say, "Do you like regulation?" Most people wouldn't say, "Oh, I love this." But at the same time, like it's putting something in. When we were growing up, bikes were awesome. Like they were our ticket to freedom on
Mm-hmm.
things. I probably crashed my bike, handful of times. I can still remember, one of my grade school friends, very bad bike accident, where he was riding along and his bike fell in, or he got a skinny Bianchi. It was a super cool bike, real skinny tires, and it
Yeah.
fell in with the storm grates. His front
Oh my
tire
gosh.
dumped over, and this is all. I don't even think we had helmets as an option back then, going back some years ago.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But he had a concussion, had to go to the hospital and everything like that. E-bikes, like you're just not, instead of going 8 miles an hour or 10 miles, however faster we're going on our little pedal bikes, if you're doing 20, 30 miles an hour and you have those same level of crashes, like it doesn't end well. So here
Yeah.
is something where regulation does need to catch up, because and you're also dealing with kind of that immature frontal lobe of a younger kid who doesn't think in terms of or
Yeah.
consequence.
Yeah, my son on just a regular bike, it's like teaching him to stop at the stop sign, right? I mean, it's a real thing for
Yeah.
sure. And by the age of 12, I don't think much changes, but yeah, the cutoff age is 12. At least that's what's they're proposing. I think it's through, but it takes some of the time for the stuff to say effect. And anyways, just interesting. Well, let's dive into some of the topics. My name's Peter. I'm here with Mike, and we're gonna just go through some insurance brokerage topics as we continue growing and building Falcon West insurance brokers here. So anyways, I'll be traveling for the next 2 weeks. So hopefully we'll still be able to keep these recordings going. But I think from a topic standpoint, we wanted to talk about something about a North Korean work scam that you read about. So I'll let you kind of share what's going on.
Yeah. So I enjoy reading the news every day, a variety of different sources. And over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal had a just very interesting article on something that I was familiar with, but not to the depth, which is one of the reasons I enjoy Wall Street Journal's reporting is they usually take things to a whole new level of depth on topics that I find interesting. So specifically for this, it's dealt with remote worker scams. And in the situation, it's a program that the North Korean government in North Korea, for those familiar with, I mean, it's such an insular country where basically shut off from the rest of the world, but it's a very poor country in terms of no one is interacting with them, at least legitimately. So there's very few areas to make income. And then you have a leader who has just these massive military desires to have the biggest army in the world. So how do they fund this? The scam that the Wall Street Journal had profiled was using legitimate IT work skills, but through not even really stolen identities, but leased identities. So the way it works, and the reason why this is of interest is Google estimated that over a third of the Fortune 500 has employees right now that are effectively agents of the North Korean government. $100 million in basically wages that were funneled to North Korea last year through U.S. companies unwillingly. So it's almost $1 billion a year into the North Korean regime. And the way it works, and the profile is very interesting. So it was a person who had defected to South Korea and whose story and background was verified and vetted as being accurate. So he said when he was in the fifth grade, or their equivalent of the fifth grade, he had tested well and was effectively recruited into the spy agencies. So his schooling from then on was all related in computer sciences. When he graduated from college, he moved to China and was living effectively in a dorm setting with other people that had similar skill characteristics. And then they would go to and recruit real people to use their identity as stand-ins. So they would fabricate credentials that would be for a real person, but then in order to kind of wash or launder the fact that these were actually North Koreans, if they were required to have a video meeting or any sort of video type correspondence with their employer, they would lease these people who effectively would become their real identity. In the background, the North Koreans were doing the work, and they were doing legitimate IT work, and they're getting paid a salary for that. And the North Korean government would take 90% of their earnings. And in fact, these people were almost slaves, but they were brainwashed to believe that, they were soldiers for North Korea. So they'd
Right.
take 2 or 3 jobs. They'd work 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then in turn, these wages that they would earn would go to the North Korean government. And they'd even
Wow.
go to such lengths where they would find people like server farms. So they would recruit people in the US and basically say, hey, we know you're struggling with whatever. Here's a chance we'll pay you, several $1,000s a month. You agree to just host laptops in your apartment. And they come up with a story that wouldn't necessarily be plausible, but at least would give a person a little bit of deniability. And the Justice Department actually had a case last year where they arrested and charged and convicted 4 people that were running these server farms for and they didn't know they were working for the North Korean government. They just thought that they were helping people who needed to have their laptop in the US so they could access remotely. So again, the level of technology and sophistication
Yeah.
into this. And then as an employer, it's tricky because you may think you're dealing with a legitimate offshore IT firm that promises, lower costs, good work. And they are providing, these are smart people providing good work, but following the money trail, it's effectively funding the North Korean government. So
Yeah.
interesting.
We're blessed to be able to, continue finding good people in the United States that are and still work remote and all that. But I mean, we've talked with, VAs and, virtual agencies, or I have at least, and just to kind of see like, data processing. This was a couple years ago. I mean, it is difficult because you're kind of, you sit there on these like, interviews, and it's like you get admitted to a room and then they basically show you, here's 20 people, you talk to them for 5 minutes, and then it's a very bizarre world in that VA space. But I mean, just to get into, I mean, almost so $800 million. That's a massive amount of money.
Yeah.
I think of it because you and I had talked about, and I'm working on an article right now on this topic, but the whole W-2 versus subcontractor work and like how that falls into the insurance. I'm just like, there's got to be some trickle effects from that too. But not that I want to make this about insurance, but this is a very interesting, definitely an interesting problem that needs to be figured out. It sounds like the Justice Department's trying to get around to it.
Yeah. And to that, what can a company do to protect themselves? Keys would be just don't cut corners when you're vetting candidates. If you can, and let's say you are being investigated by the government because they find out that you are employing these folks. If you've done the steps and kind of done your job of vetting, then that's your defense. That's your good way to get things. If you've cut corners or you're knowingly complicit or anything like that, obviously you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
But important to, basically follow the right steps, try and do the right thing, and then hopefully a little bit of luck, things go your way.
Totally. Agreed. So our second topic to move on to another thing we wanted to talk about was, I think we've talked about brokers and all that, but being an account manager, right? And really, I think how that can be a really satisfying career. Funny enough, I was talking to my sister Natalie. So she's my, I'm the oldest of 6. She's child number 4. And so she's really good at human resources. That's what she went to school for, got her master's and all this crazy stuff. But she's like, working for a huge corporation right now and potentially getting promoted and moved and all this stuff. And I was like, that's great, right? She came over to babysit for us. We hung out for like an hour after. And I was like, and she's like, I just don't know if I want to do HR. And I'm like, I said, it's because you want to come work with me. Like I can feel it, like you're just tired. You just want to come hang out with your brother again. And she's like, well, maybe. And I started talking about being an account manager. And she's like, so you guys like work from home, you're like helping with paperwork, you're reading stuff, you're doing, and I'm like, yeah, all stuff you're really good at already. But, and she's like, but I got my master's in HR. And I said, but you just told me you don't like it. Anyways, that's another story. But the account manager side. So I want to hear like your aspect of it. I, as a broker, like I love the account managers I get to work with. They're all awesome. They all have I don't know, they just have this like foresight on how things are going to happen with a carrier and how to, the right place and all this stuff, this wealth of knowledge from all of them. But on your side, being, the leader of our company, would love to hear your perspective on the account manager role.
Yeah. I'm first off, the account managers, like a good account manager, of which we are so fortunate to have just a great team behind us. It makes the broker look even better. And they'll do things that the broker can't do. And whether that's timely responses, whether that's proactively helping customers with whatever that request may be. But it's such a key part of that client relationship. And if you think about, the customer, the broker, and then the account manager, and, each of those, if the account manager isn't great, then we're not going to have the client very long. If the broker isn't great, then again, we're not going to have it. So equally important role on that. And if I think about it, there's several facets of the property and casualty insurance industry that just make it, in my opinion, one of the greatest occupations you can do. And it's funny how the same bullet points kind of hold true, but depending on which angle a person is looking at it from, it's for different reasons. But it gets to the same result. For example, banks, lenders, clients, the government, they all require insurance. They require a business to carry insurance. So those organizations think, well, this is important, that we need this. From an account manager's perspective, that's great because you have people who may not understand it to the same level that you do, being told you must have this. And then that account manager role, in turn, is to be able to explain, here's why you need this, and here's how you need to have it set up. And so you've earned that trust factor from your clients, and you earn their gratitude of, hey, I got this piece of paper saying I need this, and you were able to explain what this means to me, explain what I need to do, and then take care of it. I think you're the greatest person in the world. So to me, that's a very that mandatory demand factor of insurance could be problematic for folks because it's like, I don't understand this. I don't know why I need this. I don't know what this is. And then you have this account manager coming in, being able to explain, well, here's why, and here's how we'll set it up, and here's how we can take care of that for you. So extremely gratifying position for the right person who is motivated by, hey, I've earned this client's trust. I've earned their things. I feel good about this. I feel good about the job I did today for this client. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, agreed.
You look at something like private equity firms love the insurance space because of that recurring revenue.
Mm-hmm.
An account manager, for the same reason, likes this space for the recurring relationships you get to have with clients. I've worked with clients now for 25 years. A lot happens in 25 years. A lot has changed in my life.
Yeah.
And, for those clients that I've had that level of relationship for, I mean, you cannot put a value or price on that. It's invaluable. And in turn, they trust me at that same level. So it's pretty cool to have that type of relationship with a firm and see them go through ups, see them go through some bad times. Just to me, that's pretty special. And account managers, again, some of our account managers talk to our clients on a daily basis. And when that goes on for multiple years, you can't help but to get to know them and just take the relationship to a whole new level. So that's pretty cool.
The relationship side of this is like huge. I think every client I have is stored in so I got my work phone, got my cell phone, but most of them know how to reach me. And like that, like it's true. Like when someone calls me that's a client, like I don't know what to expect on the other line. And generally it's always been great news or, hey, I've got this thing I need to update. But it's like, it kind of brings, I just smile. Like when I know there's a guy, like a couple days ago, some guy, I'm like, I get to talk to this guy, right? I'm just excited. So anyways, it's fun. We got great people, great clients and all that too. So a lot of fun. It is fun. But yeah, and specifically though, like at Falcon West, again, kind of going back to our, we're building a remote insurance brokerage, right? So we're fully remote. We have an office, but I think that aspect too, that we've been able to maintain while other places are calling employees back to work or back to the office, we've been able to stay remote and find some great people to work with us that are like-minded, I think, right? So there's a lot of benefits to that too.
Yeah, 100%. And you hit on the key word there, the like-minded aspects. Um, COVID was a game changer for a lot of different industries. We our team was working remote. Half our team was working remote prior to COVID. So we had the system set up in place. And I remember when I was first starting out, before Falcon West started my career, if I need to like send a really big file, I had some remote capabilities working from home, but if it was a really big file, I was like, oh man, I'm just going to drive into the office because otherwise it's going to take me forever to, send this email or do something. So with Falcon West, I started 2012, purposely built our systems out that it would support remote work. And again, half our team was working remote before COVID happened.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yep. COVID came around. We moved the rest of the team remote. And again, we thought it would be for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we all did.
Yep. And then as that time went on, again, we already had the systems in place. So it was more just the folks that were kind of used to, well, I always go into an office. That's what I've done for whatever years. Eventually, they realized, you know what, I do recognize that there are benefits for like-minded people working in a remote setup. And interesting now, like, because you see like companies like, you must come back in the office, or you must, we have the benefit of being a smaller organization. We're 35 people, where again, we can get like-minded. So we don't have to say, you must do this because you have to. And I remember like when I started at Falcon West, when it was, these were the hours you need to work. Like, we don't care if you had your work done or if you did, it was, the hours were what governed the job. If you'd show up a little at, 4:31, you're going to get trampled as people were running out the door because the clock had hit that number. So it took us a little while, but we were effectively, and again, gets back to that like-minded point. We don't want someone that has the mentality, oh, these are my work hours, and yes, we have hours that we work because we want to have clear expectations to clients. But we want someone who's like, okay, what's the job I need to do? And what do I need to accomplish that? And I don't necessarily need to be in a physical office with others to do that. I have the ability to communicate with my team through whatever messaging or Zooms or phone calls or emails. So I can have that collaboration with my teammates, but I don't necessarily need to drive to an office and all the things that are incurred with. And, if you think, especially if you live in a bigger city, I mean, it can be thousands of dollars a year, tens of thousands of dollars a year. If you figure vehicle costs, eating lunches, dry cleaning, and then just that time, we obviously bring people onto our company that we're faced with 90-minute plus commutes. And to me, that's just not a great use of your time and unnecessary. There are no big files to send that you can't send from home right now.
Yeah.
It used to require that, oh my gosh, I got to go to an office.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun, and we'll continue to grow in that same trajectory. And it's just like, it's that steady growth that we've always been after. And as we bring more people in and more brokers and we have a training program that we're developing, like there's all these amazing things that are kind of coming. So we'll keep going, and I'm thankful every day. So we'll pivot. Our last topic. The question I want to ask you is sort of a back to basics on insurance. So this section's dedicated to new brokers, new account managers, and learning how to explain something. Maybe that's more of a simple topic, but the importance of UIM coverage. So I'm going to pass it off to you, but if you could explain that topic to us in just a simple overview would be awesome.
Yeah. So UIM, short for uninsured motorist coverage. What is it? Do I need it? Why should I try and get as much as I possibly can? Uninsured motorist coverage is a little bit of a misnomer in that its main premise is covering you if you're involved in an accident. You're not at fault, so there's someone else who's at fault, but they either don't have insurance or they have too little insurance. So you can comply with state requirements and carry $15,000 of coverage and be perfectly legal to drive on the roads. Obviously, 15,000 isn't going to go very far if someone has a serious injury. So uninsured motorists to the rescue. What a lot of people don't know about it, though, is it's not just when you're driving a car. A friend of mine, coworker of mine, getting ready to go to a Vikings, or he was downtown Minneapolis going to a Vikings game. So if you just imagine Minneapolis, the stadium is in the downtown area. On game day, there's all sorts of people walk in. The street corners are crowded and everything like that. He's getting ready to cross the street, and he gets the walk arrow just like everyone else. And there's a car who got a green arrow at the same time, and a uninsured driver, didn't have a license even.
Oh my gosh.
Driving a car, thought they could try and beat the crowd by gunning it and trying to make that left turn before people got into the intersection. And it didn't end well. Thankfully, my friend lived, but there was probably 8 people who got hit by this car. They're driving a big SUV, and he couldn't work for a period of time.
That's horrible.
And he was an insurance broker like I am. So he makes his living on commissions, surgeries, medical appointments, all those types of things, and just the ability that he couldn't sit at the desk. And he'd been a successful broker for a number of years. So he had a track record of what his income was, and his income was about 20%. And he went to his own uninsured motorist coverage that he had on his auto and umbrella policy to pay for that loss. So it can cover you as a pedestrian.
Yeah.
If you ever ride in someone else's car. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to...
No, I mean, I'm in the same. So until I started insurance as a career, did not think about any of this stuff. And then, but then I look at it and like, there's been accidents, whether it's my family or friends, and I'm like, I need to carry uninsured motorists. And I think I was carrying, not the minimum, but whatever. And I increased that. And then you learn that you can, you can carry that on your umbrella as well. And I'm like, well, I mean, these are not, when they happen, they're not easy claims to deal with, right? And they're very messy if they're serious. I mean, it can be, it really is always a serious situation. But umbrella, I just want to mention that you can increase it on your umbrella if you don't feel comfortable with the limit that you have on your auto.
Yeah, and a great point, Peter, in that there's some carriers that will offer that, not all.
Right. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And then some may even cap it at $1 million is what the max you can buy on your umbrella for uninsured motorist coverage. So we work with many carriers that will offer you, 3, 4, 5, up to $10 million for your uninsured motorist coverage on your umbrella. Super important.
And typically you have to get liability, you have to carry liability on your umbrella, then you can add the uninsured motorist. For whatever reason, one has to come before the other, but
yep,
good to note.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So yeah, you're underlying on your auto policy, and then the umbrella is just providing higher limits on that.
Yeah. California, I think it's the last stat I read, which is a couple years old, it's like 1 out of every 7 is uninsured on the road or underinsured. And then you've got a whole nother side. The most recent I read was closer to 1 out of every 4 in California, which is, that's a huge, over a 5-year time span, I think is when the report was written. That's a big difference, from what it was to what it is. So.
Yeah, and those are the uninsured, and it's another probably 20% of the population. So almost half the population would either have no insurance or would carry like $30,000 in limits, which again, not for any sort of serious incident, the equivalent of carrying no insurance.
Gosh. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here. We're working on our show format. We're improving things. I think this is recording. Oh my goodness. We're almost coming up on 10 here, Mike. So we're doing
nice.
We're staying consistent, which has been great. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions or comments or things you'd like us to cover, let us know, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Peter.